Welcome to Spink Insider, the podcast where history is valued. My name's Olivia. I am a banknote specialist here at Spink.
And I'm Ella Mackenzie, and I'm a coin specialist here at Spink. Hello.
Hi.
So today, I guess we thought we would touch on the subject of gold.
Yeah.
It's obviously a massive topic, lots to cover, but sort of posing the question, why has gold fascinated humanity for thousands of years? Its different uses, its mythological associations, just its journey, really, and why it's so prized and, why it's got such a big presence.
Well, when we're talking about what subjects perhaps you and I could cover, you being a coin specialist, me being a banknote specialist, it was what is the sort of themes that might bring our specialisms together.
Yeah.
And gold is just so universal. It really came up as one of the topics that we suddenly realised we had loads to talk about.
Yeah, it was a very natural thing that came up. I mean, obviously from a coin perspective, I'm very lucky to be able to handle gold and see it in lots of different forms from lots of different eras, and from a bullion perspective as well. But I think as we go along, I'll be quite interested to understand how gold is relevant
how
to
it
you
fits into paper money,
paper banknotes, or your career and what you've done in the past as well. We thought that would make an interesting topic.
Well, that being said, I say that we had loads to talk about it. When I started doing a bit of research, I realised how little I actually do know about gold itself. But you know a lot about gold, so maybe you can hit me with some gold facts.
Well, no, I mean, there's certain things that I've learned whilst working here, and dealing with gold coins and things like that have really interested me, or, sort of dashed some expectations that I had. So I guess from a perspective of, why is gold the important metal that it is? Why does silver not have that same allure, or copper, or anything like that, or iron?
There's no iron medal at the Olympics.
No, exactly. Well, that's the thing I was thinking. There's pirate treasure, Olympic medals, wedding rings. It comes into so many different areas of life.
Yeah.
I think there's several things going on there. You've got the durability aspect. Obviously, gold is a very soft metal. I mean, it can literally be hammered into gold leaf. But from a corrosion perspective, it really doesn't corrode. And artifacts, I'm sure you may be familiar with, being an archaeologist, that have been maybe in the ground for thousands of years or in a tomb. If you bring them out into the light, they will pretty much look just as beautiful, just as shiny.
Not a day older than when they were buried.
Yeah, exactly. So, I mean, it always has that enduring allure. And then obviously from a rarity perspective. So the fact that I learned whilst working here is that there have been less than 250,000 tonnes of gold, which does sound a lot. Ever mind. However, that would be less than the volume of an Olympic-sized swimming pool.
Really?
Which, obviously, again, is a big thing. But when you think about it...
No, it's not at all.
That's
actually
actually
think about all the gold that
nothing.
would be in the world.
Yeah. So, obviously, an incredibly rare material. And then I think from the perspective of beauty and its warm lustre... as we were saying, obviously, if you found something that was very old and it would still look as beautiful. But I think just the intrinsic light that it captures, that's why it's used in jewellery, or one of the reasons it's used in jewellery. It's just a beautiful element.
Yeah, definitely. So it has universal
appeal. Exactly. No one is going to say that's ugly, or I think it's a natural human thing to be drawn to beautiful things, and naturally gold falls under that category.
Definitely. I know that definitely myself growing up, I felt like such a little magpie. Anything shiny, I just loved it.
Yeah. if probably not gold most of the
time. No, unfortunately I didn't see much gold, but yeah.
But no, and also the fact that due to its position in the world nowadays, and really in all of history that humans have been around, the ability to have such a large value in such a small amount of metal, making it very portable, and that has obviously played a big part in lots of historical tales, and being used maybe to flee somewhere, and you'd be able to just take like a little coin purse of things that could keep you going for years, or used in bribes, or taken on pirate ships, and it's a very portable method of wealth. And I think it's very easy nowadays when we have online banking and digital currencies and everything to sort of get wrapped up in, it's a very physical and it's heavy, but really, before the internet, that was that and gems were really the only way to portably easily move wealth if you weren't taking a large amount anywhere.
Yeah.
So I mean, also I've slightly touched on it there, but gold in ancient communities, obviously we'll be touching on a lot of different things today throughout history.
I mean, now you're speaking my language.
But
ancient,
obviously,
ancient gold.
Pretty much any ancient civilization that had access to it prized it.
Yeah.
I don't know if there's any in particular that jumped to mind that you have particular knowledge on.
I know that, every culture throughout history seems to have revered gold in a number of different ways. Ancient cultures, the ones that jump to mind immediately, Roman and China.
Yeah.
But above all else, for me, just because of my own interests and my bias, it's ancient Egypt.
Okay.
Ancient Egypt absolutely revered gold, like all ancient cultures, but they absolutely revered gold. And I think that the biggest sort of icon that I think the majority of us associate with ancient Egypt is Tutankhamun and the death mask, the funerary mask of Tutankhamun. Yeah. I think he almost has become as iconic of ancient Egypt in sort of popular culture as pyramids or the Sphinx, or even Cleopatra. Yeah. And in the sort of timeline of ancient Egypt, it's crazy to think that, because ancient Egypt is such a long period of time. There's points in ancient Egypt where the history of ancient Egypt would have been ancient to them, which is just so fascinating. Yeah. So we start the timeline at 3,000 years BC, which is 5,000 years ago. And Cleopatra, the last queen of Egypt, was around when Egypt then was taken into the Roman Empire, which is 30 BC. So it's a huge span of time. And Tutankhamun is sort of bang in the middle of that. He's around 1,500 BC. Okay. So he's kind of bang in the middle. Right. And at a time where throughout all of that timeline, you have, as can be imagined, so many political changes, so many dynasties, and so many periods of wealth. And then there might have been an invasion and then they've lost wealth or a dynasty's collapsed, etc. At the time of Tutankhamun, Egypt is very, very wealthy. Yeah. But generally speaking, ancient Egypt is an immensely wealthy culture. So obviously there is still the association of the monetary value of gold. But in ancient Egypt, it's also this huge spiritual value.
Yeah, that's interesting.
Which I'll get to the spiritual value in a moment, because I think what's really interesting, and I was actually asking you about this yesterday. Yeah. What's really interesting about the mask of Tutankhamun, I think nowadays, and again, before working at this job, like you were just saying about perhaps you've learnt more things in working in an auction house. Yeah. I had never thought about how much the gold in Tutankhamun's mask would be worth, because to me, I just think the mask itself must be, it's priceless. Yeah. It would never be sold.
No, I would hope not.
And no, you'd hope not, unless the Great Egyptian Museum in Cairo really goes through some hard financial times. But what I absolutely found so fascinating was, I didn't tell you what it was for, but I asked you for a price of gold yesterday.
I did wonder what that random email was.
So I asked you, and I wrote it down in my notes so that I could tell you. But the funerary mask of Tutankhamun, it's basically, so it is almost solid gold. It's made of 2 sheets of gold that are hammered together. Right. And obviously there is inlaid, there's precious gems in there as well, so that will add to its weight. Yeah. But the overall weight is roughly 10.23 kilograms. Gosh. Okay. And the gold is 22 carat, which for me, I don't know anything about, the quality of gold. I don't know how much the gold price is, because I'm a specialist in paper money, so very different. But I asked you yesterday, what is, like, given at the time of recording, given the price of gold, what would that weight in that quality of gold be? And you said a figure, which was £745,000, £745,767 British pounds in gold. Yeah. Now, if that's the price of Tutankhamun's mask, I think you are getting a bargain.
Yeah, exactly.
Exactly.
Like, obviously that is a lot.
Yeah.
But it has that historical association that outweighs that amount.
I mean, when I was thinking about this, I remembered in, I want to say 2019, around then.
Yeah.
It was before the pandemic. So about 2019, Christie's sold a bust, a stone bust of, I believe it was either Tutankhamun or it was a very close match to Tutankhamun. But it was widely accepted to be a bust of Tutankhamun.
Right.
And that sold for something like 4.7 million. And that was just a stone bust.
Yeah.
So I can only imagine what the death mask of Tutankhamun would sell for.
Yeah.
And again, I've never thought about that before this job. I always just thought about the spiritual meaning of gold and the value associated with the cultural value, not necessarily the monetary.
Yeah.
But it's really interesting to think about how, again, you could look at the price of gold, the price of anything, given its market value, but actually you've got to think about the cultural value of that as well. And I'm actually fortunate enough, I don't know if I've told you this, maybe I have when I've been telling you about, archaeology and digging and all sorts, my life before Spink. When I was an archaeologist, I actually got to go to Egypt, and I went to
I don't think I knew that.
I went to the ancient, I went to the Egyptian Museum in Cairo.
Okay.
Which is now the Great Egyptian Museum.
Yeah, so not the new one, but the one before.
No, so I went to the one before. Okay. So I went in 2017, 2018, around then, when I was still a student. And I got to see all of the Tutankhamun burial goods in one room. It is absolutely incredible. And a bit like when you go to the Louvre and you see the Mona Lisa, or if you went to the National Portrait Gallery and you see Sunflowers by Van Gogh.
Yeah.
Everyone is crowded around the death mask.
Yeah.
Completely understandably. Yeah. It is amazing. But there are like 2 or 3 other rooms, obviously, in the previous iteration of the Egyptian Museum. Now, all of the goods will have been moved there and placed differently. I look forward to seeing how they've done it in the new one. But in the old one, there was, 2 or 3 more rooms of just a sea of gold. All of his burial goods were gold. It is absolutely incredible. And I know this sounds really silly, but I was blown away how shiny it is. Again, like you say, something could have been buried for thousands of years. Tutankhamun was alive in 1500 BC.
Yeah.
And his burial goods, all of the gold, is so shiny.
Yeah.
And it is really, really breathtaking.
Yeah.
And I know that the archaeologists who discovered his tomb, so when he was alive, Tutankhamun wasn't actually that sort of big of a deal in ancient Egyptian history. No,
that's not the impression you get, I don't feel like,
not at all
when you see the death mask, or because there's so few relics like that, or that are so visually arresting, I guess.
Yeah, and I think that obviously, like I say, ancient Egypt was an immensely wealthy culture, an immensely wealthy
the whole way through, really.
There was dips of when it wouldn't have been, but generally speaking, well, because it's just such a huge timeline. We're talking, 3,000 years of history.
Yeah.
There were dips where it wasn't as wealthy, but the majority of the time they had huge. There were gold mines within their sort of empire, so a lot of gold to go around. Now, during his lifetime and during sort of contemporary sources, Tutankhamun was not that big of a deal. He became pharaoh at the age of 9. And I'm trying to remember this really quickly.
Yeah.
I think he became pharaoh at the age of 9, but he died when he was about 18.
Right, okay.
So a very short reign.
Yeah.
He wasn't that impactful. He wasn't that important. But he's, in modern times, become really famous because of his tomb.
Yeah.
Because when it was found by archaeologists in 1922, it was really well preserved. It was quite undisturbed. I think there had been some
grave robbing,
but in comparison to the majority of pharaohs' tombs, there was very little grave robbing.
Right.
So there was so many golden artifacts there, and I actually have reread before doing this, I reread what Howard Carter said. So Howard Carter was the archaeologist who discovered the tomb, and he was with the Earl of Carnarvon, who was sort of funding this expedition. And Howard Carter basically made a little hole in the wall, and he looked through it and saw the untouched layout of Tutankhamun's tomb.
Amazing.
And I have what he said in the account of that here. So I will read it to you because it's quite goosebumpy when you hear it.
Okay.
So Howard Carter, in his account of finding the burial, said, "As my eyes grew accustomed to the light, details of the room within emerged slowly from the mist. Strange animals, statues, and gold. Everywhere the glint of gold. For the moment, an eternity it must have seemed to the others standing by, I was struck dumb with amazement. And when Lord Carnarvon, unable to stand the suspense any longer, inquired anxiously, 'Can you see anything?' It was all I could do to get out the words, 'Yes, wonderful things.'"
Oh.
And truly, I cannot imagine the feeling of seeing that for the first time. I mean, when I used to be an archaeologist and I would uncover a bit of pottery, I would think that was so exciting because it had been, several hundreds of years since anyone's seen that bit of pottery. Not quite on the same level as Howard Carter.
Slightly different.
Yeah, I think any archaeologist dreams of this kind of revelation.
Yeah.
And I did get to feel a little bit of that in... a few years ago, I went to Ferrens Art Gallery, which is an art gallery in Hull, where I'm from.
Yeah.
And they had an exhibition there, which were all replicas of Tutankhamun's burial goods. But the way that they displayed them was really clever. And I think it was really a lesson in good exhibition management. It was brilliant. They both basically put up a wall, and they put you could go round it, obviously, but all of the replica burial goods were behind this wall, and they drilled holes into it at different levels, so you could peep through. And on the wall, it had these quotations. It had from his account of seeing it, and you could peek through and see these brilliantly lit replica burial goods. And again,
that's such a clever idea.
Seeing them, you kind of get to pretend to be Howard Carter for a minute and
that little
pretend
moment.
you've discovered it. But the burial goods were absolutely incredible. And the reason that gold was so immensely important to the ancient Egyptians has a lot to do with their religious beliefs around the sun. Now, this will keep coming up when we talk about gold in any culture. It's the association with the sun, and we really can't overemphasize the importance of sort of cosmic power and the sun and the moon and the stars to ancient cultures. And the sun god Ra in ancient Egypt was sort of the main god. Obviously, a very long history. We go through many iterations of gods, but he's a major god.
Right.
And he is responsible for traveling across the sky in a boat every day. And he's the reason that the sun is going across the sky. And then at night, it's believed that he then travels through the afterlife, through the underworld, and he's reborn every morning.
Right.
There's also part of the mythology is that he's in this eternal battle with a snake god called Apep, who represents, darkness and chaos and yada yada. So it's the metaphor of light over dark and good over evil and
night
and that sort of thing. Exactly. But the whole point of that is that the sun very naturally gets associated with rebirth and the sort of beginnings again and good, basically. And so in ancient Egypt, when you would have burial practices, which I won't touch on because I will talk for hours about ancient Egyptian burial practices, they are absolutely fascinating. But it is completely understandable that gold, obviously for very rich Egyptians, not everybody is able to have gold. But it's completely understandable that it is used in burial practices because it represents not just the immense wealth of that individual, but it's so closely associated with rebirth. And they did believe hugely in the afterlife. It was more important than your life on Earth, really. I mean, National Treasure Philomena Kunk / Diane Morgan puts it perfectly. She went viral, a clip of hers went viral, and the audio went viral for her saying that the ancient Egyptians believed the most significant thing you could do in your life was die. And it is so true. It's absolutely so true. So it's completely understandable that his death mask, Tutankhamun's death mask, one of the best preserved examples we have of a funerary mask, is basically made of solid gold.
Yeah.
So yeah, hugely significant, not just in a monetary sense, but culturally significant as well.
Gosh, wow. I feel like I've learned so much already. I guess just to touch on the point that you made, like when we were talking about how much the gold price, the intrinsic gold price would be for the mask compared to its historical connotations. Because that was something that I've learned whilst working here, the difference between gold is gold, but you have bullion gold, and then you have more, if we're talking from a coin perspective, or potentially things like jewellery, where they have a collectible premium above that. So they're lead, obviously, a gold coin is always going to help compared to the same example, but in silver.
Sure.
But you have things, I've brought many coins here today, but we've got here a gold bar. So there's a kilo of gold.
I am so excited about the fact that you brought a gold bar.
I know.
To this
well,
recording.
It's a bit like you see it in films and things like that.
Yeah. In the British, sorry, not in the British, in the Bank of England Museum, they have this they have a gold bar in a case that you can sort of put your hand in. Like at the zoo, you can sort of, there's these things where you can sort of touch animals. They have this thing in the Bank of England Museum where they have a gold bar in a case that you can sort of put your hand in and hold a gold bar. I've not done it. I've got to say, I think that all of the security around it kind of takes away from the experience of holding a gold bar. So I am so excited. The fact that there is a gold bar on the table in front of me.
I know, it is a bit mad. But yeah, so obviously you've got gold in its pure form. This is, they never say 100% pure, because there can always be impurities from the world around, but essentially pure gold in a kilo bar. You tried picking it up earlier, and
I did.
So heavy.
Genuinely, it's so heavy.
It's so heavy. Very shiny, like nothing's been done to it other than being stamped. Am I allowed to hold this?
God, it feels...
Yeah, it's not really going to come across on camera, but it is very heavy.
It's genuinely probably the same as, I'm such a weakling, but it's probably the same as what I would hold at the gym. It is
a kilo, so I don't know what your
I take that back. Cut that.
But yeah, obviously, like in this case, this is, I say just with a heavy hand, but just gold. But we get a lot of people sometimes with a misconception that a gold coin, such as more historical coins that I have here, for example, this Elizabeth I sovereign, we have people occasionally say, oh, well, that'll do really well because the gold price has shot up. But actually, yes, the gold in the coin is worth more than it was a couple of years ago, because I think everyone's aware at this point that gold has really rocketed in terms of its price. But the collectible value of that coin, which in gold is about £800, in numismatic terms, that's over 15,000. So it's sort of bypassed the intrinsic value to be something that has a collectability value instead. So that's a big difference, in that there are sometimes crossovers or things where condition makes a really big impact on that. I've got a sovereign here. So this is obviously a coin, and it is gold. It's 22 karat gold. That's the standard for a sovereign in the UK. But sort of our general rule is after 1850, and there definitely are exceptions to this, but after 1850, a gold sovereign is likely just going to be worth the intrinsic gold value, which at the moment is just under £600. The older they get, obviously, they tend to be rarer, or people, want the older monarchs. They want George III or early Queen Victoria heads and things like that. But this is an investment coin compared with something that is more collectible, like the sovereign, or even like this guinea here, which is like the precursor to a sovereign before they changed it in 1816. So again, I'll caveat all of this by saying that condition does have a big role to play, as do certain years or rarer mints and things like that. But there is a big difference, and I thought it was just important to sort of caveat the whole conversation if we ever talk about certain collectibles and things like that, that gold has an intrinsic value as a metal, but then the objects that it has been created into, such as the mask or a ring or a coin that's more historic, likely has a value that sort of surpasses that, where the monetary value is not as relevant anymore because it's so historically interesting or has other interesting things about it that makes it worth even more.
Yeah.
But yeah, I thought I'd just touch on that because of the sort of the link with the mask and things like that
definitely
you mentioned.
I think that it's so true that in this job there's a lot of things in collectibles that I hadn't really thought about before.
Yeah.
And obviously something will have a market value, but it also has a different value to collectors depending on rarity, condition. Sometimes those might cross over, but more often than not, there is a big distinction between the two.
Yeah.
I'm interested to know a bit more about coins. Being obviously a banknote specialist myself, I don't come across them that often. Are there any sort of famous, notable coins in general that are either gold related or worth as sort of covering?
Yeah, I mean, there are countless, obviously, that have either gained great high prices at auction or that are just more sort of revered in culture. I brought a couple of illustrative examples here because I think the easiest way to sort of qualify that with an answer is to sort of think of types or eras or countries and that sort of thing. So you might be interested in this as an archaeologist, but I do have a Roman aureus here, and it's Hadrian.
Very nice.
I know close to where you're from.
Close to my heart. I was originally born in Newcastle, so I feel like I grew up very much close to Hadrian.
So on this aureus, it's a beautiful coin. It's got his portrait, and this was obviously super important for the emperors of the day to show their authority, show their superiority, and having it on a gold coin as well, which, as we've been saying, has been revered as such a precious metal for so long, was really stamping authority, literally, and then being able to distribute it. You know, they didn't have the internet, they didn't even have post. So this was the way that image would be circulated along with his name. And also, interestingly, on this, our ancient specialist, Axel, very kindly gave me the coin to show and just noted that it's got the Romulus and Remus with the she-wolf on the back. So this is the myth of how Rome was created. So you can't really get a more important image-making piece of numismatic for the emperor. He is literally saying, you know, I deserve to have the authority, and this gold coin links me back to the formation of Rome. So that I would argue is quite an important one.
Definitely. That's kind of a motif that we see a lot on coins and banknotes, is the harking back to the origins of your country and sort of it establishes your power. I mean, that's one of the reasons why I love seeing archaeology on banknotes that we will come to later, is that it really does say, in the modern day, we are so connected to our history, and it sort of emphasizes whatever the new issuing authority or whatever the new sort of political group in charge of that country. It does say, I'm so right to be in this role because I'm so linked to the past.
Well, I would also point, I know I said about it before, but the sovereign here, you've got the George and the Dragon design. So this is actually a sovereign from the reign of George V, so you can see his portrait there. But that George and the Dragon design has been in use since Queen Victoria, and we still stamp it on sovereigns today. So that, compared to other designs that have been on the reverse of shields in England anyway, that has become a sort of enduring symbol of authority and sovereignty, and we still use it today, and you know, obviously links George and the Dragon, English, etc. But sort of quite interesting as to what you mentioned there. In terms of other coins, I also have an Indian gold moher here. Obviously quite a different style. We've got the calligraphy on both sides, and that's from the Bombay Presidency. I believe it's 1801 that one's from. So you can sort of see here, every country, doesn't matter, or even era, have been using gold as a way, if they had access to it and it was part of their currency, then it would be the highest level. And that's, you know, you see that throughout history and probably will continue to see it. As I've just said, the gold price is the highest it's ever been, really. So it's not going anywhere, and we still are drawn to gold, especially in times of uncertainty and things like that, which obviously now is a time of uncertainty, but that's happened several times throughout history, and people have been drawn to the tactile form of it and the hard form of currency.
Could I have a look at the Roman one?
Absolutely. There you are. Yeah, it's quite powerful, I think. That is a very, very beautiful example.
I mean, I was going to say the condition of this, the quality is.
You ever found a
absolutely
gold
amazing.
coin, one of your digs?
I have never ever found
Really?
a gold
Never?
coin. I've never found.
I mean, it's pretty it's pretty special.
Yeah, but I've also heard stories of detectorists who the first time that they go out detecting,
we do get that.
They find a gold coin.
Yeah.
And I cannot. In all the years I was digging, I never found a gold coin. And it is a bit sort of. I mean, that's the point of treasure. It's very elusive.
Yeah.
And that's what keeps you going out and keep digging,
is
that you think one
imagine.
day I've got to find this treasure. That is absolutely stunning.
Yeah, it is pretty wonderful.
Wow.
And then just moving on to some other pieces that we have here, I've got a couple of coins from a hoard called the Hambledon Hoard, which was found in 2019, and it is a hoard of 12 gold nobles and then hundreds of silver pennies. But the gold nobles are particularly significant because prior to this discovery, only 12 of these particular type of coin were known about. So it's doubled that number. And this was pretty much doubled the amount of gold that we know that was circulating around the time of the Black Death.
What an amazing discovery.
Literally incredible. So it's mid-14th century, reign of Edward III. And what I'll show them to you, because what is equally impressive is their condition. So yes, they are a little bit crumpled from being under the ground for so long, but the condition, it's like they've basically come from mint to ground or wherever they went. And actually as we've been cataloguing them since, noticed that they've actually got a sort of mortar or some residue, like potentially quicklime or something, on the coins, which suggests that they were a foundational deposit and potentially stashed away quite quickly
in a wall or the floor.
In a floor. That bit's not really certain at the moment, but the fact that it's at the time of the Black Death, this is such a significant amount of money circulating.
What's the rough sort of worth at the time, do you know?
The hoard itself, which was 12 gold nobles, was worth more than the entire tax, the entire amount that the town that they were found in would pay in tax in a year. And it was just, they were stashed together. So just to try and sort of give an illustration.
Give a scale,
but as I was saying, if there were only 12 other gold coins that we know about, obviously there could be more, and there was other gold circulating, but essentially this is really significant. And you'll see on the coin that they've that it's got Edward III, who was the monarch at the time, standing in a ship, and he had an incredible reign, very long reign, one of the longest reigns in English history, but obviously saw things like, as I mentioned, the Black Death. He started the 100 Years' War with a claim to tried to claim the French throne, and the details on this are just so absolutely amazing. So again, another example of a ruler stamping his authority on gold in such a beautiful way. I think often, like, the Middle Ages and medieval times get a very bad rap, and that, you know, everyone there was no skill, there was no artistry. It was the Dark Ages. But when I see coins like this, that's just, I realise that is just so not true.
It's such brilliant craftsmanship.
I don't even know if we could make something, and that's without machinery, anything like they're so intricate, so detailed. And again, in a time of crisis, someone desired to bury those, and sadly never came back for
gold
them.
Gold is constant.
Gold is a constant, and it's always been desired and revered in that way. So just another couple of examples.
Thank you so much for showing me those coins. They are absolutely breathtaking. But again, if they were in a different material, would I find them as breathtaking? I'm not sure. It's the allure of gold. It is so shiny and it's so beautiful. And the only form that I really come across it in life in general is jewellery, because, you know, it might be that a family member has a gold ring. I know that I'm wearing a few now that the family members have given me. I don't feel like anywhere else in life do I actually get to see gold and touch gold. It's
I am in a weird profession. That is true. But definitely that. I think most people, gold is a necklace, a wedding band, anything like that. We are more used to seeing that. And I did bring in a couple of pieces of jewellery here, and I thought,
please go through them.
I thought this one actually, this is really impressive. This is a Viking gold ring.
That is huge.
It's huge, incredibly rare. And I thought this is actually a perfect segue because it's obviously gold has an intrinsic value now, but especially for the Vikings, yes, this was a piece of jewelry. Yes, it's exquisitely made and was, a really important way to show that you were an incredibly important person, because barely anyone would have been able to own these. But for the Vikings especially, it was an important portable method of currency. So, there weren't banks. You wore your wealth or you stored it, but this was a protective, you would have it on you if you went pillaging or on a ship around the world. Yeah. This would be on your finger, and they would be used for trade and gift giving. And what I find really interesting about this ring in particular, you see the terminals are sort of wrapped around each other. Yeah. And obviously you made the comment like how big it is. It's literally massive. Like it wouldn't like fit on anyone I know's finger. But
how big were Viking helmets?
I think sometimes they were worn over gloves, so you have that.
Okay, that might make sense.
But also the fact that they've got the terminals, that it's not just one band, is that that would have been adjustable, and that kind of goes along with the idea of trade, and it may have been passed from hand to hand. So rather than sort of, I've got a gold ring, I'm going to keep this for the rest of my life. If you're in a sticky spot or you want to pay your way to something, then you would potentially be able to use your ring, and the next person would be able to wear it just as easily.
I mean, the Vikings were so not just huge traders, but they were also really nomadic. They were traveling here, there, and everywhere. The Vikings went sort of all the way to Russia and Greece and up to sort of Iceland, and they traveled an insane distance, and they were huge in trade. So it makes sense that gold would be so attractive to them because it is so portable.
Yeah, absolutely. And to completely contrast that, I've brought another ring, but this time from the 19th century. And this is a gold mourning ring with black enameling. So
you'll
around
have
the edge.
to tell me what a mourning ring is, because I actually don't know.
So this is I think quite sadly, but this is a tradition that really doesn't exist anymore in British culture anyway, or Western culture. I'm not sure if it's done elsewhere or in this specific way, but very popular in the Victorian era, and sort of from the sort of 1600s onwards. When somebody died, if the family was wealthy enough, there would be rings made to commemorate them, and they would often have the name of the person that died, the date, usually very specific, which is brilliant for when we're trying to track who the ring belonged to, and usually the age that they died. So this one is to a man called Captain Robert Hudson, and he was a captain for the East India Company, and he died in 1817. He also became a director of that company. There's a portrait of him in the National Maritime Museum as well. I found it really interesting to be able to track that back, and you can see along the edge, get it in the right place. So it starts here and it says in memory of, and then on the inside, which we might do a close-up of because it's very difficult to see, but it has his name and the date of his death.
Could I have a look?
Of course, because the black enamel sort of hides a lot of the gold, but and it's obviously got the seed pearls and a little panel which potentially, I know it grosses everyone out, but potentially had hair or a piece of fabric, maybe from one of his jackets or something.
Sort of in that panel there.
Yeah.
Wow.
So it's, a lot of people find that quite gory. I don't think so. Maybe that's just because I'm a history nut. But I think it's actually a really lovely tradition.
No, I think that's really sweet. I can understand nowadays, I don't think I would necessarily want any jewellery with my sort of relative's hair in it. But it's not something that I am, grossed
people
out
are being
by,
made into diamonds nowadays.
People are being made into diamonds. Maybe our next episode should be on diamonds.
So, but also what I was going to mention is that obviously this is an emotional investment for the family, and there'd be usually quite several rings made, given to close members of the family or potentially given out at funerals. But it was also a financial investment. Again, gold was not accessible to everyone. It became more accessible from the late 19th century onwards, when there was more gold being available from the Americas and Africa, which made it a little bit more accessible to the emerging middle class. But really, it was still for the elite. And what I find quite interesting is that in people's wills, you often find them specifying, I leave I leave my field to so-and-so, I leave my hat to them, but I leave a specific amount of money to make mourning rings. So they would plan ahead. So when I die, I'm going to leave a specific amount of money for my family to make mourning rings. Sometimes it's worded, just for mourning or less specifically than that. And the Victorians ended up sort of making brooches and frames and everything with lots of gold and lots of hair. But rings are the essential, the bedrock of that. So as a sort of tie to financial and emotional gain. And I think, it links back to what you were saying about gold, not just being valuable from a monetary perspective, but also from an emotional one.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, the fact that the two rings look so different, but they are like similarly as historically and culturally important in very, very different ways.
Yeah, absolutely.
We have already spoken a lot about the mythology around gold. I mean, you were talking about the coins. We've got Romulus and Remus on the Hadrian coin. And then also we have already seen George and the Dragon, which is obviously the sort of the national mythology of England.
Yeah.
I think that gold itself comes up in a lot of mythologies, not just as a sign of wealth, which is true, it does come up as a sign of wealth.
Yeah.
But also, I feel like it's used a lot as a warning.
I agree.
In a lot of fables and a lot of sort of teachable stories about greed and wealth and that obsession with, as I said before, we're all a bit like magpies. We all like a bit of shininess.
Yeah.
But it is also used as a warning against that sort of mentality.
Yeah.
When we started talking about doing gold, the first thing that popped into my head was King Midas, the story of Midas.
Of course.
I remember so vividly in primary school, I don't know what we did, if it was an assembly or a play, but we reenacted Midas. So it really vividly in my head, I can remember the story. Yeah, I don't know who I was. Probably no one, probably a flower in the garden. But the story of King Midas is such a time-old fable about greed and gold specifically. Where I don't know if you remember the story, but King Midas, I'll tell a very short version of it because it can be a bit longer. But King Midas is speaking to Dionysus, who is doing him a favour, and Dionysus, who is the Greek god of wine, and he's basically god of having a great time. He's god of loads of things, and they're all having a great time.
Okay,
and he grants King Midas a wish as a favour. And King Midas asks if the wish he could grant was that anything I touch turns to gold. And Dionysus, as rightly so, as a lot of the Greek gods do, they sort of grant you a gift and they grant you a wish in Greek mythology.
Okay.
But there's always a slight twist. There's always a dark side to what you're asking for. There's always a moral. And Dionysus says, sort of, are you sure? Midas says, yep, I want everything I touch to turn to gold. So Dionysus grants the wish, off he goes. And then everything King Midas touches turns to gold. So he walks through his garden and he touches the roses or the plants and they turn to gold. And he's amazed. So he touches the pebbles on the ground, the stones in his garden, and they turn to gold, like coins almost.
Yeah.
And he's so ecstatic. He's going to be the richest man in the whole of Greece. So he celebrates. He asks the servants to bring him a table with food, and he is brought food and wine, and he picks up a piece of bread to eat it, and it turns to gold. So he can't eat it. He picks up his goblet of wine, and that turns to gold. So you can't drink it. Molten gold, can't drink it. And then some time passes, he's celebrating, but the story is turning, and he's suddenly realising that this gift is much more of a curse. And his daughter comes up to him, and she sees that he is upset, so she tries to console him. And as soon as he touches her, his daughter turns to gold. And he is so upset with the fact that his daughter has basically been killed by himself, by his own hand, that he begs Dionysus to take back this power, to take back the wish. And Dionysus grants that, but he says you have to go into the river, into the, I believe it's the Pactolus, and you have to wash in the river, and that will take away the power.
Right.
And the Pactolus is a river in it's in Turkey, I believe, sort of in West Turkey, part of ancient Greece at the time. And in that river, there's actually a lot of stories about that river, about how gold got in it, because it was said that after Midas washed himself in the river, his gold goes away, and forevermore in the river you could see gold dust.
Oh, really?
But actually in that river there is naturally occurring gold alloy. So it is true that there is gold in that river. Yeah, maybe it was Midas. But again, in that story, it's gold used as a fable against greed. And it is just such a brilliant story. It's so visual.
Yeah.
It's so beautiful and so sad. And obviously the longer version is a lot better than what I'm saying, but that's the sort of Cliff Notes version.
Yeah.
And gold is being used as this warning, not just this amazing, beautiful material.
No, well, you see it as you mentioned in so many texts. I mean, you know, the famous quote, all that glitters is not gold.
Yes,
or
yes.
Glisters from Shakespeare.
Yeah.
And
that's
that
from
quote,
the Merchant of Venice.
Yeah.
When she's had Portia, she has 3 caskets. One of them is gold, one of them silver, the other one is I don't know, pewter or something sort of not very attractive.
Yeah.
And the fable, the sort of moral being that all of these suitors, they come and pick essentially the wrong box because they're picking what they think is the wealthiest, what they think is the right choice. And in that one, Shakespeare says, we know it's all that glisters, but the saying is that when the box is opened, it says all that glitters is not gold. And it really does sum up that fable. Yeah,
and sort of since then, I mean, potentially it had been in use before Shakespeare sort of made it so famous. You know, there's potentially it's mentioned in Aesop and things like that, but since Shakespeare, you know, that Thomas Gray, the famous poet, paraphrases it in his Ode to the Death of a Favourite Cat, which is a brilliant poem I would recommend to everyone.
I've never heard of that one.
Yeah, it's about his cat who sees goldfish in a bowl, and then when he's going to get them and he falls in and he drowned. So it's kind of a play on words in that all that glitters is not gold and the goldfish, and ended in his sad demise of the cat.
Very, very clever.
But, you know, it's been used for centuries, really. Yeah. And probably one of the more famous examples of it is it in The Hobbit, Bilbo Baggins?
Yes, we were just talking about this the other day. I was trying to remember the like a quote about gold, and honestly the one that came to my mind was in Lord of the Rings, Bilbo Baggins, in one of his poems, he basically, it's the all that glitters is not gold, but it's the other way around.
Right, yeah.
And it's all that is gold does not glitter.
Yeah.
So it's sort of the reverse of the saying. It's that all valuable things don't necessarily shine.
Yeah. Yeah. No, it's just yet another example of how it's so universally revered.
Yeah.
You know, dragons guard it in myths.
Yeah.
You know, there's whole groups and societies trying to master alchemy to try and create it.
And we've already talked about pirate treasure.
Yeah.
And people like me digging, trying to find it.
So yeah, it's obviously super important. And I guess to draw onto the banknotes, tell us, how does gold relate to a banknote?
Okay, so there are some banknotes that are actually made of gold.
Really?
Yes. And I have handled them before, and I'm absolutely terrified when I do.
Were they like gold leaf or something?
Yeah, they're sort of like, they almost like feel like a foil. And so I'm so scared because even if I'm handling them completely correctly.
I already feel nervous enough for handing a coin.
Exactly. I'd be so scared to bend them. There's also a Bank of England note called the gold note.
Okay.
But it is just a white note with a Nairn signature. And that in itself is interesting. But when we talk about gold on banknotes, because I used to be an archaeologist, because that is where my sort of passions lie, when I see archaeology on banknotes, that's when I absolutely get excited. And there are 2 Colombian banknotes that have gold artifacts displayed on them as part of their design.
Oh, wow.
And they're artifacts from the Gold Museum in Colombia.
Right.
And I have some here to show you, but I must say, before anybody worries about them being handled, these are printed versions. They are not the real banknotes. Unfortunately, I don't actually have any at the moment in Spink to show you. But I wanted to show you the design because you can really see the artifacts.
Yeah.
So I'll show you this one here. This is the 20 gold pesos. Now, this has artifacts from the Gold Museum on it. I'll just pass that over to you.
Thank you.
And as you can see on the far right of the banknote design, there's sort of a little human figure.
Yes.
And it's called a tonyo. And what the artifacts you're looking at there, they are made by the Muska, who are also called the Chibcha. So sometimes the words are changed. But the Muska are a sort of pre-Columbian culture. They're before the Spanish arrived in the 16th century. The Muska were one of the cultures, one of the communities who were in Colombia at the time. And they have the most incredible gold working skills. They make the most beautiful objects. And what you're looking at there on the far right, that is called a tonyo. And it's sort of a human form. Now, tonyos can be, they're sort of anthropomorphic or zoomorphic. They're sort of either or. Often the zoomorphic figures, you find snakes. They're very common, linked to a Muska mythology, a sort of creation myth. But the tonyos are most commonly in that human form that you can see in the banknote design. And you can see on the 2 pesos note, the 2 gold pesos note here, which I'll show you. You can see a raft. Now, that is called the Muska Balsa. So it is the Muska raft. And it's an object that is in the Gold Museum in Colombia.
What the raft is?
Yes, wow. But it's displayed on the banknote there. And it's basically lots of those tonyos attached to a flat oval shape to form the look of the ceremonial raft that the Muska would use. And it is just the most incredible story of revering gold in a culture who are known for such amazing gold work. They would take this raft out onto a lake in Colombia. And it was to inaugurate their new zipper, which is basically their sort of president or prime minister. It's the leader of the group. It's called the zipper. And the zipper, surrounded by his attendants, would go out onto the lake. And he would wash himself in the lake, but with gold sort of dust. And he would then wash that off in the lake. And from the raft, they would then drop into the lake loads of gold votive offerings or precious gems. There'd be lots of tonyos. There'd be lots of, especially the snake shaped ones. There'd be animals. There'd be tonyos in the shapes of people, and they would throw them into the lake.
Are the tonyos, are they literally ornaments, or are they vessels, or are they literally just for decoration and sort of practices?
Yeah, I would say that generally speaking, the tonyos, at least the ones that I'm familiar with and that I've seen, are to do with this votive offering. The Muska have also created things out of pottery that are vessels. And they would also use gold to make sort of pectoral plates as part of sort of being adorned. But a lot of these objects that were made of gold ended up at the bottom of this lake because it was part of their sort of spiritual beliefs about this cosmic power of gold. And the lake is very much connected to the creation myths, and it connects them with the world. When the Spanish arrive in the 16th century, there is a misinterpretation of what this very spiritual ritual means. And I can understand, because if it's completely not in your culture and you arrive and people are throwing gold in the bottom of a lake, what is reported home by the Spanish is that there's loads of gold at the bottom of this lake. And the Spanish extracted a lot of gold from Colombia at the time. So I can understand when the Spanish arrive, they've never seen this before. They report home about all the gold that's in the bottom of this lake. And it just becomes this insane legend. And the ceremony, named by the Spanish, is called El Dorado, and just means the golden man. And I'm sure when I say El Dorado, it does actually ring a bell.
Of course.
Because El Dorado has become this huge myth about this lost golden treasure. Or a lost city of gold that possibly is at the bottom of a lake. And it all comes from the Muska culture and the ceremony that they would have for the zipper, for the leader. And then the Spanish sort of bastardized this tale into the legend that it is now.
Yeah.
And we see it all the time in there's loads of films about a lost city of gold. There's a DreamWorks film for kids called The Road to El Dorado.
Yes. I remember that one.
Have you ever seen? I've never seen it. Is it good?
It's quite good from memory. I've not seen it in a while, but
I first heard about El Dorado not from archaeology or anything like that. I first heard about it because I used to play a game called Uncharted, which is a video game. Which one of the games, there's a few iterations of the game, but one of them is you're looking for the lost treasures of El Dorado, all of this gold. And so, it becomes this almost on the same level of Atlantis. It becomes this huge legend. Yeah. But it all stems from this really significant religious practice, which is quite beautiful. And the sort of lasting moral of that whole story was really summed up well in a poem by Edgar Allan Poe called El Dorado. And I would say that I have sort of done a bit of a deep dive on these Colombian banknotes in our magazine, The Insider. In the magazine, I talk a lot about the banknote itself and the obverse design as well, because it's all to do with Colombian heritage. And there's a lot more to the Musca. There's a lot more to the design choices that were made for this banknote and what it means about their national heritage. Yeah. But when we're talking about just the objects themselves and how they connect overall to this use of gold in mythology, the person who puts it best is Edgar Allan Poe in his poem El Dorado, where it basically tells a story of a knight who is traveling all his life looking for El Dorado, looking for this lost city of gold that contains, countless treasures. And he meets, he grows old, he's looking for it his whole life, and then he meets a shadow, a pilgrim shadow on his journey, which I can only imagine probably represents death. But I'm not a literary genius, so I'm sure somebody else can tell me a better interpretation. But he meets a shadow on his journey, and he asks the shadow where he might find El Dorado. And what the shadow basically says is that he has to keep riding and on into the Valley of the Shadow, which again I think just probably means death, and only there will he find what he's seeking. So the moral of that is this sort of spiritual and religious longing that you're mistaking for sort of earthly riches. But it is put so beautifully. I do have the final stanza of that poem here, so I will read it to you.
Yeah, no, do.
Because it is so beautiful. Yeah. So I wrote it down so that I could read it. Again, like I said, this is the story of a knight, and he's met who I think is probably death on the road. And this shadow says to him, "Over the mountains of the moon, down the valley of the shadow. Ride, boldly ride," the shade replied, "if you seek El Dorado." And it's such a beautiful way to conclude all of this discussion of morals and the value of gold, not just monetarily, but also spiritually, to all of these cultures throughout history across the world. You see the same reverence for gold, the same beliefs in its connection to the sun and connection to rebirth, and to power in general. So it's a really beautiful poem. Yeah, no, that is beautiful. Thank you for reading that. I think it's a perfect sort of coda for the whole discussion, as you mentioned, and sort of how we've discussed that there's forever really been a longing for gold, whether that's spiritual, financial, emotional, but also gold can be used as a warning, and it can have negative consequences or negative connotations. There have been wars over gold, and gold price spikes when there's uncertainty in the world, and all of these things. So it really is the element that does it all, really. Yeah, definitely. I mean, even just the countries and the cultures we've covered, all the way from sort of Greek mythology to the Musca in Colombia. We've talked about the Vikings, we've talked about mourning rings, we've talked about gold in a modern sense, we've talked about the Egyptians. We all of these cultures are connected through their love of gold. I think gold's power really
lies as much in the stories that we attach to it as in the intrinsic elemental metal itself. So yeah, I've had a wonderful time.
Yeah, thank you for sharing all these objects with me. It's
That's
absolutely
all right.
amazing.
No problem. Thank you.
Thank you for listening to Spink Insider. Please like, subscribe, and if you've ever found a gold coin, please let me know in the comments.